India and Singapore have signed MoUs in the field of digital technology, semiconductors, health, cooperation and skill development, which will further strengthen their cooperations. The agreements were signed after Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is visiting Singapore, and his counterpart Lawrence Wong held bilateral meetings. Remember, viewers, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had arrived in Singapore and received a ceremonial welcome at the Singapore's Parliament House and was welcomed by Wong. He also signed the visitors' book at the Parliament House and met ministers and delegation. Let's first move on to the big screen to understand the MoUs that have been signed between the two countries. Let's go to the big wall over there, and I'm going to give you an understanding on what it is. What are those four memorandum of understandings that have been signed between India and Singapore? We're going to quickly, of course, this is a shot there coming in from Singapore, but we're going to quickly give our viewers an understanding. There you have it. Memorandum of Understanding number 1, cooperation in digital technologies helps to facilitate close cooperation between the two countries in areas of DPI, cybersecurity and 5G. That's, of course, the first memorandum of understanding between the two countries. We have more. We're going to give you an understanding on that front as well. Semiconductor ecosystem partnership, something that was, in fact, spoken about a lot. Cooperation in developing a semiconductor cluster and cultivating talent in semiconductor design and manufacturing. That's, of course, there in the picture. The one that we had been speaking about a lot, considering the fact that semiconductor is, of course, India is looking to become the world's semiconductor hub. Number 3 over here, cooperation in the field of health and medicine facilitates joint effort on research, innovation and closer cooperation in the areas of healthcare and pharmaceutical sectors. So this is, of course, the third MoU that has been signed between India and Singapore. We have the last one for you over here that has been inked. Educational cooperation and skill development now aims to promote closer cooperation in the areas of technical and vocational education and training. So these are again the 4 MoUs that have been signed between India and Singapore. This is, of course, taking place. This took place as Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Singapore, and those are, of course, the 4 MoUs that have been signed. So these are, of course, the latest developments that are coming in. My colleague Prathamesh is with us on the broadcast to give us more on this. Prathamesh, take our viewers through these 4 MoUs that have now been inked between India and Singapore.
Yes, correct. As Prime Modi is on the visit, and now he has visited Singapore over there, and he has signed different MoUs as well, as because he has signed different MoUs as this will make a cooperation, the further cooperation between the Singapore and India as well. The relationship between the Singapore and India will increase, as there are the 4 different types of MoU. First will be on semiconductors, second is on health, third is on different types of MoUs. Total 4 MoUs is been signed. Even the education has also been signed. Education MoUs have also been signed in this. Like if I talk about semiconductors, semiconductor is also really important issue which is currently in the India as well. And for that, India also needs some of the supports from the different countries as well. So now they have also signed the MoUs. Singapore and India has signed the MoUs of the semiconductors as well as about the education also. As if I talk about the education, as there are different types of problems in India, as well as India is the underdeveloping country, and for the underdeveloping country there should be like some of the countries who can give us a support system. And from here, from this visit, we can say that the Singapore, from Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited Singapore, and from Singapore as well as we are getting the nice cooperation from there, as well as the semiconductor is second, then third is education. So this is from education as well, the MoUs has been signed. So these are the MoUs which has been signed by the Narendra Modi and from the India as well. So if I talk about the other MoUs also which was been signed, if I tell you about the other MoUs which was been signed, that will be like around the digital. So digital, around the digital also the MoUs will be signed, because now the India is getting into a new scheme, the Digital India, and for that the India also need also need some of the new things from the other countries as well. If I talk about 5G as well, so 5G is now introduced in India and it need more of the work to be done in the 5G as well. So these are the different types of MOUs which are being signed by this India and Singapore. Yes.
All right, Prathamesh, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, sharing all those details with our viewers. Meanwhile, joining us at this point of time is Mr. Arun Mamfazi, semiconductor expert. We're also being joined by Mr. Rabinder Sachdev, international affairs expert. A very good morning to the two of you, and thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX. I'm going to rope in Mr. Mamfazi into the conversation. So now, Singapore accounts for 10% of all chips produced in the world, produces 20% of global semiconductor manufacturing equipments. Now, in light of that, how does this MOU then propel India's vision to become the world's largest semiconductor hub? Mr. Mamfazi, can you hear me? All right, I think we're facing some troubles over there, but I'd like to take this a question forward with Mr. Rabinder Sachdev on the telecast, sir. Again, as I was seeing, a significant percentage of the world's manufacturing equipments and chips are produced in Singapore. In light of that, how does this then propel India's vision to achieve its target of becoming the largest semiconductor hub globally?
Well, thank you very much. I think in the big picture, the issue with regards to semiconductors and Singapore is that, Singapore does not have land and labor. That's one challenge for Singapore in a big picture, right? It has been doing well in semiconductors, as you have yourself also pointed out. Singapore wants to move up in the value chain. So far, I think they're producing, and maybe Arunji will be able to tell better, I think they're mainly focusing on, chips which are of 28 nanometer and above, which are used in, appliances and other equipments. They are not producing right now chips which are used for AI, right? AI chips are much smaller in size, 6 nanometer, 7, and even going down to 4 or 3, right? Singapore wants to move up in this chain and produce the higher end chips. So what it could be looking, and it is looking, is that to move part of its established, production supply chains to India or some other region, let's say India, so that it can itself move up on the higher on the value chain of semiconductor chips. So that's one. It needs to move, it needs to get into the higher end semiconductors, but it does not have the space. So better for it is that the existing ones which it's manufacturing and, that ecosystem, if some of it could be, pushed to India, that helps us in creating our own ecosystem, right? And it frees up space and resources in Singapore so that it moves up higher in the supply chain. I think that in the big picture is the thrust why Singapore is looking and partnering with India much more intensively regarding semiconductors.
Right, so absolutely. I believe Mr. Arun Mamfazi is back with us on the telecast, sir. Taking from what Mr. Sachdev has said, the fact that there is this form of codependence with India, considering the fact that there is a smaller land given out to the semiconductor hub in Singapore. How does this partnership then benefit the two countries, and of course more so India?
Hi. So it's an interesting thought that Mr. Rabinder shared about the Singapore looking at the possibility of moving some of its mature node facilities, fabs and things like that to India, and then using those facilities to move up the value chain. The challenge though is that none of those fabs or none of those companies which work in Singapore are headquartered in Singapore, right? They are all, for example, I just recently saw report in connection with the Honorable Prime Minister's visit that they've listed the different companies that are there in Singapore. It says IC Design, MediaTek, Realtek, Qualcomm, Broadcom, AMD, assembly and packaging, a few companies, fabs, Global Foundries, UMC, Micron. The thing is, neither is Global Foundries nor UMC nor Micron Singapore owned or Singapore headquartered. They're all American owned, American headquartered, or some other country headquartered, having a branch in Singapore. So the question then becomes, how much of a say does the government of Singapore have in terms of requesting some of these companies to cooperate with India. Maybe they also need to evolve some policies, as Mr. Rabindra pointed out. Maybe they can incentivize, saying that, hey, you guys go up to the higher value chain or the smaller nodes. We will give you some incentives, and then relocate your existing facilities to India or something like that. I mean, it's something that we have to wait and watch. Secondly, in the semiconductor space, there is only so much that government to government cooperation can do. It can only facilitate, can only suggest. It's a friendly gesture that go work with India. For example, even with US, right? We have the ICET, the Cooperation on Emerging Technologies. But really speaking, as an after effect of that, how many companies have actually invested in India? Micron, yes, but there was more geopolitics to it, because Micron was being pushed out of China and things like that, and the CEO of Micron is of Indian origin. But beyond that, we haven't seen an Intel or a Global Foundries or any of these US headquartered companies come and set up shop in India. So the point is that these MOUs mean only so far. It is what really matters is the follow up after that. How do you actually make realize, and how do you take it forward? And I really hope that the India Semiconductor Mission takes it forward into actually making things happen on the ground.
Right, so absolutely. I'd like to rope in Mr. Sachdev into the conversation. So, of course, we were, you in fact spoke about AI chips as well. With that in the picture, there's of course an MOU that has been signed between India and Singapore for cooperation in the field of digital technologies. How do you then view this MOU that has been signed, and how is this perhaps going to pan out?
Thank you very much. No, certainly, I agree with Arunji that MOUs are at best indicators. Sure, they are enabling, and the governments have some role, but governments do not have much role also. At best, they can create enabling conditions, regulatory environment, ease of business, and create certain other aspects which compel or which encourage private sector to come, and private sector will come in with its own calculus and looking at the ecosystem. India, with regards to electronics, we are certainly way behind in terms of where we are. But yes, we are making an effort, we are trying. So that is the path. Now, as far as digital technologies and all are concerned, once again, yes, see, Singapore is an advanced economy, an advanced country, a tech, I would not use the word giant, but a tech-enabled country, highly tech-enabled, right? So there are various areas. There could be areas, in fact, even in fintech, there could be areas, for example, of cooperation between Singapore and India. So those would be, the areas I would look at and see, they stop, I think, even of 5G, or maybe even going on to 6G, but 5G, I think they're talking. So R&D, definitely yes. So all of this, bottom line, it requires a whole lot of stakeholders to come together and work towards an initiative. But at the same time, I do think it indicates that, India and Singapore, these are logical partnerships between India and Singapore, or logical areas of cooperation between India and Singapore, right? We have a good, strong IT industry. We are, leading in innovations in some areas. Without doubt, we are leading in some innovations, and those innovations can be plugged into with the ecosystem in Singapore. Yes.
Right, so I'll in fact like to rope in Mr. Mamfazi into the conversation now. Just talking about the larger picture, we've of course spoken about semiconductors, we're speaking about digital technologies. How does India and Singapore then, how is this relation, this partnership between the two countries going to pan out? There's also conversation on health and medicine. There's also been a MOU that's been signed on educational cooperation and skill development, all that combined together. How do the two countries then benefit from each other, and how does this then pan out?
Yes, I think the bigger picture definitely looks good. For example, the skill development and training. India definitely has a lot of manpower. It is just that they need to be trained in some of these emerging technologies. In fact, in some of my articles, I have many often written that when India takes up training its youth, we should probably train them with the mindset that half of them are probably going to go out abroad and settle. That's fine. Even then, the rest of the other, the other half who remains in India, they can still contribute, because we don't have a dearth of youngsters. We have them in millions. Likewise, the IT support that Mr. Sachdev was also pointing out, we are very strong in that. So many of these fabs or many of the semiconductor industries or even healthcare, everywhere there is the need for IT, and India in general, even though we have not been a great product country, we have been very good users of technology. Meaning, if somebody comes up with a great technology, Indians learn it quickly. We learn how to fix issues with that. We give the support, service, everything. So in that sense, these are all areas where Singapore can also gain from cooperating with India, and India can gain in terms of getting used to the technology and things like that. One last point, going back to the semiconductors and in general also, that I want to add is some of the infrastructure needed. For example, when it comes to fab, there is a requirement for water purification and things like that. And as a country, I think Singapore has done a wonderful job with very limited resources, how it manages its water resources and things like that. And these are things which India can learn. It might not be a copy and paste for India. We have different conditions, but still I'm sure there are elements that we can learn, elements that we can cooperate on, the supply chain needed for some of these. So there are a whole lot of such possibilities that this MOU will hopefully open the doors to.
Right, so just a small question for you, Mr. Mamfazi. You of course, I would like to understand from you, since these MOUs have been signed and we're hopeful that they are going to have a great impact on the semiconductor industry, on the digital technologies. With that in the picture, I would like to understand from you, does this then help India retain its talent in India?
I honestly no, right? I mean, if anything, this is probably at some level going to lead to more brain drain from India. That's my honest opinion. But that's fine in my opinion, because we've, that's what I mentioned, that we are a country where we almost, practically have unlimited resources, unlimited manpower. And so it doesn't matter even if X percentage of that after getting trained goes abroad. In fact, I even suggested that the government of India look at the possibility that you do some skill development, you do some training on some of these technologies to youth in India, with the condition that if you stay back in India, then we'll return your money. We will return the fees. If you don't, then you end up paying the fees. Something like that. I'm sure things like this can be worked out. So the point is that we have to assume that a good percentage of the talent will go abroad, may not retain, until the actual industries related to these come up in India. Once they start coming up in India in huge scale, many of them might return, but there is that intermediate phase where the industry itself, for example, a fab takes 5 to 7 years to be up and running. So so there is that time until, but you can't wait for that 5 to 7 years and say that we will start training after 5 to 7 years. No, you start training right now. Many of them might go abroad. In fact, some of them, for the sake of getting trained in some of these facilities abroad, they'll have to go abroad. And even if 10%, 20% returns, should be good enough for India to run our show. That's my opinion.
All right. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mamfazi, for joining us on the broadcast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.